Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another little miniature paint along. I'm so happy that you're joining me, and I thought normally I do the voiceovers for my abstract paintings, but I thought I'd explain the step-by-step process that I do for my miniatures. And you can see here I've just put on the first wash or the first layer of watercolor. I'm going over it to make sure that it's even and that it's got like a nice coverage. And then I'll go through with paper towel and I'll lift out sections of what I just put down. I don't know if this is the right method to make clouds, but I found it quite effective with me. Now you'll notice that I didn't go back to dip my brush into the watercolor. There was enough color and water on it for me to drop in some more texture to the clouds. And then I'll go back and then I'll pick up darker paint, just to make some shadows and highlights in the clouds. Again, I haven't done this very long with the clouds, so I'm still experimenting. I haven't watched any tutorials about how to paint clouds in watercolor, and I've done that on purpose. And the reason I do that is I like to explore how I would do it first and then look for tips later on. The reason I would do that is because that way I can really kind of explore skills that I have, and then anything that needs attention or I need extra help with, then I can kind of refine that afterwards. But I like the exploration myself because I think that also dictates the kind of style that I have. I talk a lot about style, and style for me is very much practice. The more you practice, the more your style will become evident. The way you do something over and over again, that will show through in your painting and in your finished pieces. So that's why I like to experiment myself and then go in with tutorials later on. I know my videos aren't very explanation based, I guess, and the reason for that is I like to watch these kinds of videos when I'm painting myself. So the videos that I watch, the creators that I consume mostly, just have nice relaxing music on in the background. Don't talk, which, sorry, I'm talking now. But I can just glance up occasionally and just look at what they're doing. And so that's the kind of content that I like to consume myself. So you'll see I kind of moved on from the clouds and I just put a light wash over the bottom part of the painting. So it's around the bottom third. I'm playing with dividing up my canvas into 3 sections, and that helps to create the scale. So that helps to create that visual, like incredible oomph that you get from a vast sky. But having that lower third as a landscape, it makes it feel like it's receded and far away. So you get that sense of depth in the painting if you try and break it up into thirds. So I've broken it up into thirds horizontally, as you can see here. I go back, and as the paper dries out, I kind of tweak the clouds in different ways. I add more or I add less as I see fit. The paper is still quite wet. It's still got some moisture in there, and the reason for that is I put that wash down first, and then when I went in with the paper towel afterwards, I picked up some of that pigment, so that the white sections that have made the clouds, they're a lot drier. What I've done now is I am lifting the paint off the paper again, and this is done using a clean brush. And what I'm trying to achieve is that kind of lake feature in the beginning there. And I find if it's not 100% cotton watercolor paper, the results from this vary greatly. You don't get a consistent result. I only ever use 100% cotton. It's more expensive, but there are many alternatives, like depending on the weight of the paper. So the thinner the paper, obviously you don't have as much play or as much water added to your pigment as the thicker paper. But yeah, just experiment with your style. I know that I don't use a huge amount of water in my work, The 300 GSM is what works really well for me, and I know how much water it can take, I know how much pigment it can take, and it's something that I use just for the miniatures. If I was painting this a lot larger, I know I would have to use a lot more water to have the same amount of time to work on it, because it just scales up. So if I was working on a larger piece, I would probably increase the thickness of the watercolor paper to 600 GSM if I could. The reason I'd do that is because I know I'd have to use a lot more water in order to have the same kind of moisture content in the paper in order to achieve the same bleeds and things like that. And the only way you learn that, again, is through practice and just getting to know your materials and how they react with one another. I have been painting with this particular watercolor paper for a few years now, and with my Winsor & Newton professional watercolors, so I know how the paper and the paints react with each other. If I were to change any one of those ingredients, then the result will be different. And I think that's an important thing to understand and to recognize. Sometimes you might not get the results you want out of watercolors is because the materials you're using are either different to your reference or different to what you're used to. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Consistency is, like so many things in our life, the key with achieving a result and refining a style. Of course, that comes with a grain of salt, so you can mix things up, you can change things, but just don't expect exactly the same results every time. So I think that's an important thing to remember too as you're practicing. So as you can see with this little landscape, I am slowly building color and contrast. Now, I've mentioned this in videos previously. What is most effective, especially with landscapes, is this play between the lightest and the darkest parts of your painting. That's what gives it depth. That's what gives it depth. And that's what helps to create mood and energy within the painting. So just bear that in mind as you're adding layers and as you're playing with your paints, to try and have that contrast of lights and darks. So you can see here, this is quite a small area. I make all my own watercolor blocks. So this is a piece of Tasmanian oak hardwood that I have cut to size, and I attach my watercolor paper to that hardwood block. And I do all that myself. It takes ages because I have to sand, I have to varnish, I have to cut it and make sure that I attach the paper right and everything like that. But this is the final result, which I think looks beautiful. And I'd love to know your thoughts.